The company paid her before she even started working. That should have been the warning. But when $500 hit Amana Peters' account, she didn't question it. She had 2 kids to feed and 3 months behind on rent. The WhatsApp message said, "Welcome to the team." The money said they were legitimate. Her bank balance had never lied before. In 72 hours, she'd lose everything she'd ever saved. The money arrived within hours of her interview. Real money. She could see it right there in her bank app. $500, just for completing her training. She hadn't even started working yet. After months of sending resumes into the void, after countless rejections, after choosing between groceries and electricity bills, finally something good was happening. She screenshot the bank balance and stared at it. This was real. The job posting had looked perfect. Work from home, flexible hours, good pay. Exactly what a single mother of 2 needed. The company website looked professional. The interviewer on Zoom wore a crisp shirt and spoke with confidence about their expanding Australian operations. They said she was exactly what they were looking for. They said she could start immediately. The training seemed simple enough. They sent her to a platform where she had to click buttons and process orders. Each task earned points. Points turned into money. The interface looked like any other work dashboard she'd used before. Professional, legitimate, nothing suspicious at all. On the second day, something strange happened. The system showed she'd earned $2,000, but there was a glitch. To withdraw her earnings, she needed to deposit $50 to verify her account. Just a small security deposit, they said. Standard procedure for international companies. She'd get it back immediately with her earnings. She hesitated, but then she remembered the $500 already sitting in her account. They'd paid her before. This was a real company. She transferred the $50. Within minutes, her dashboard updated. The $50 appeared right back in her balance, plus the $2,000 she'd earned. She tried to withdraw it all. That's when the first red flag appeared. System maintenance, the message said. Try again in 24 hours. Her trainer messaged her immediately. Don't worry, this happens sometimes with new accounts. Keep working and you'll be able to withdraw everything tomorrow. Plus, there's a special project available. Top performers only. Triple pay rates. She kept working. The numbers on her dashboard kept climbing. 3,000, 5,000, 8,000. It felt like a game where she couldn't lose. Every task completed added more to her balance. Her trainer sent congratulations messages with celebration emojis. You're our top performer this week. Management is impressed, but she couldn't shake a growing unease. When she tried to call the company's phone number, it went to voicemail. When she searched for the company address on Google Maps, it led to an empty lot in Sydney. When she looked closer at the website, she noticed the same stock photos on dozens of other sites. On the third day, everything changed. Her dashboard showed she'd earned $12,000, but now there was a new message. Tax withholding detected. To release funds, deposit $3,000 to clear tax obligations. Deadline 4 hours. Her hands shook as she read it. $3,000. She didn't have $3,000, but if she didn't pay, she'd lose the $12,000 in her account, plus the $2,000 from yesterday, plus her initial earnings. She called her trainer on WhatsApp. The voice on the other end sounded different, sharper, less friendly. This is standard in Australia, they said. Everyone has to pay tax clearance. You have 3 hours and 45 minutes. She scraped together the money, borrowed from her credit card, transferred from her savings, even dipped into her kids' education fund. $3,000 sent. The dashboard updated immediately. Tax cleared. But now another message appeared. International transfer fee, $5,000. Her stomach dropped. This wasn't right. This couldn't be right. She messaged her trainer. No response. She called the WhatsApp number. Disconnected. She refreshed the company website. Error 404. Page not found. The dashboard was still there though. Still showing her earnings. $15,000 now. Just sitting there, waiting. If she could just pay the transfer fee. But she knew. Deep down she knew. She called her bank. The woman on the phone spoke gently, like she'd heard this story before. I'm sorry, she said. The initial $500 I sent you? That check is going to bounce. It takes a few days for banks to verify international checks. When it bounces, you'll owe the bank that money plus any you withdrawn. The room spun. Not only had she sent them thousands, but now she owed the bank 500 more, plus overdraft fees, plus the credit card interest, plus the money she'd taken from her kid's fund. She tried to log back into the work platform. Access denied. The WhatsApp messages had disappeared. The Zoom interviewer's email bounced back. Every trace of the company had vanished, except for one thing: her empty bank account. The police officer who took her report looked tired. "We get 5 of these a week," he said. "International crime syndicates. Almost impossible to trace. The money goes through cryptocurrency exchanges and disappears." I'm sorry. She wasn't the only one. As her story spread online, others came forward. A teacher in Brisbane who lost $30,000. A retired nurse in Perth who lost her entire pension. A university student in Melbourne who borrowed money from friends and lost it all. Same company name, same dashboard, same promises. The scammers had studied their targets carefully. They knew single mothers were desperate for flexible work. They knew people would trust a company that paid them first. They knew exactly how much pressure to apply and when. They were professionals. But their biggest weapon wasn't technology. It was hope. Hope that this time would be different. Hope that finally something good was happening. Hope that made smart people ignore red flags because they needed this to be real. Amana stared at her laptop screen. $48,000. Her savings. Her kids' education fund. Damaged. Her credit. Destroyed. All in 3 days. All because she believed she'd found a good job. The government launched a task force. Operation Job Scam Fusion Cell, they called it. They shut down websites. They froze cryptocurrency wallets. They made arrests. But for every site they closed, 10 more appeared. For every scammer they caught, 50 more were training. The scammers evolved too. They started using artificial intelligence to make their websites look more real. They hired people with Australian accents to do the interviews. They created fake LinkedIn profiles with hundreds of connections. They even registered real businesses with fake addresses. Some victims fought back. They created Facebook groups to warn others. They shared screenshots of scam messages. They posted videos explaining the red flags. But the scammers monitored these groups too, learning from their mistakes, perfecting their approach. The banks said there was nothing they could do. Once you authorize a transfer, it's gone. Doesn't matter if you were tricked. Doesn't matter if you were desperate. The money moves too fast through too many countries. By the time you realize it's a scam, your dollars have been converted to cryptocurrency and scattered across a dozen digital wallets. Amana's story went viral. News outlets picked it up. She did interviews warning others. But even as she spoke on morning television, her phone buzzed with new messages. Job offers, work from home opportunities, easy money. The scammers had seen her story too. They knew she was desperate now. One message caught her eye. It was from a recovery service. They specialized in getting money back from scammers. They'd already helped thousands of victims. They just needed a small upfront fee to start the process. Just $500. She almost clicked the link. Almost. But then she remembered. The scammers never stop. They hit you when you're down. They promise to fix what they broke. They know you want to believe someone can help. The psychological impact went deeper than money. Victims reported anxiety, depression, insomnia. They couldn't trust anymore. Every legitimate job posting looked suspicious. Every email could be a trap. Every opportunity might be another scam. Some victims never recovered financially. They declared bankruptcy. They lost their homes. They worked multiple jobs trying to pay back what they borrowed. The scammers had stolen more than money. They'd stolen futures. But the cruelest part was the self-blame. Victims tortured themselves with what-ifs. What if I'd Googled the company better? What if I'd listened to that tiny voice of doubt? What if I called my bank before sending money? The shame kept many from reporting the crime. The scammers counted on this shame. They knew victims would be too embarrassed to warn others immediately. Those crucial first hours when the scam was active, when hundreds of others were being recruited, when the money was flowing. Silence was their best friend. Law enforcement struggled to keep up. The scammers operated from countries with weak cybercrime laws. They used technology that stayed ahead of detection. They moved faster than international cooperation allowed. By the time police got warrants, the criminals had vanished. Meanwhile, the job boards kept accepting their ads. The social media platforms kept running their targeted campaigns. The messaging apps kept delivering their recruitment pitches. Everyone claimed they were fighting fraud, but the scams kept spreading. The real tragedy was how preventable it seemed in hindsight. Don't send money to get a job. Don't trust checks that haven't cleared. Don't believe in easy money. Simple rules that everyone knows until desperation clouds their judgment. But the scammers understood desperation. They knew exactly when people were most vulnerable. They scraped social media for posts about job loss. They targeted areas with high unemployment. They timed their campaigns for when bills were due. They also understood psychology. The first payment created trust. The early successes built confidence. The platform looked professional enough to silence doubts. By the time the requests for money started, victims were emotionally invested. The countdown timers were crucial. For hours to pay or lose everything. No time to think. No time to ask friends. No time to research. Just pure pressure and the fear of losing what you thought you'd earned. Some victims mortgaged their houses. Others maxed out credit cards. A few borrowed from dangerous people. The amounts varied, but the pattern stayed the same. Small deposits leading to bigger demands until the victim had nothing left to give. Then came the final insult. After taking everything, some scammers sold their victims' information to other criminals. Phone numbers, addresses, financial details. The people who'd already lost everything became targets for new scams. Recovery services, investment opportunities, lottery winnings. The secondary scammers knew these people had believed once. Maybe they believe again. The cycle of exploitation continued long after the original crime. Amana kept her story public despite the pain. Every interview meant reliving the worst week of her life. But if it saved one person, she said it was worth it. The messages from people who'd almost fallen for similar scams kept her going. But for every success story, there were failures. People who messaged her after losing everything. People who'd seen her warnings but thought their opportunity was different. People who believed they were too smart to fall for scams until they weren't. The technology kept evolving. Deepfake video interviews, AI-generated documents, blockchain platforms that looked identical to legitimate companies. The scammers invested their profits into better tools, staying ahead of both victims and law enforcement. Some experts called it the perfect crime. Global reach, minimal risk, maximum profit. No violence required. No physical evidence. Just words on a screen and the human tendency to hope for better. The numbers were staggering. Billions lost globally each year. Hundreds of thousands of victims. And those were just the reported cases. Many more suffered in silence, too ashamed or too broken to come forward. Yet the job sites kept hosting suspicious ads. The banks kept processing suspicious transfers. The tech companies kept providing the tools. Everyone pointed fingers at everyone else while the scammers kept working. Amana's children noticed a change in her. She worked longer hours at multiple jobs. She stopped buying small treats. She checked her phone constantly, afraid of missing bills, afraid of new scams, afraid of everything. The stress affected her health. Sleepless nights turned into exhausted days. Anxiety attacks during job interviews, because what if this was another scam? Trust issues that poisoned legitimate opportunities. Some nights, she calculated how long it would take to pay everything back. 5 years if nothing went wrong. 10 years, more realistically. Her kids would be adults by then. Their college funds gone because she wanted to work from home. The support groups helped a little. Other victims who understood the shame. People who didn't ask, how could you fall for that? People who knew that smart, careful individuals could be tricked when the timing was right. But the scammers monitored these groups too. They created fake victim accounts to build trust. They offered helpful advice while gathering information about new targets. They learned what mistakes to avoid next time. The sophistication was terrifying. Entire call centers dedicated to scamming. Training manuals for building trust. psychological profiles of ideal victims. It was organized crime adapted for the digital age. Some countries fought back harder than others. Task forces, new laws, international cooperation. But the internet has no borders. Shut down operations in one country and they pop up in another. The game of whack-a-mole never ended. The cost went beyond individual victims. Businesses lost productivity to employees afraid to trust legitimate communications. Banks spent millions on fraud prevention. Law enforcement diverted resources from other crimes. But the human cost was highest. Marriages destroyed by financial stress. Retirements postponed indefinitely. Dreams abandoned. Futures rewritten. All because someone believed they'd found a good job. The warning signs seemed obvious in retrospect. The urgency. The requests for money. The too good to be true payments. But in the moment, with bills due and hope high, those red flags looked like opportunities. Amana kept her story online as a permanent warning. The comment section filled with similar tales. People from every country, every background, every education level. The scammers didn't discriminate. Some victims turned advocate. They lobbied for better laws. They pushed banks to improve protections. They demanded job sites verify employers. Small victories in an endless war. But the scammers adapted to every defense. Bank verification? They created fake bank sites. Background checks? They built elaborate fake histories. Video interviews? They hired actors or used deepfakes. The arms race between scammers and security never stopped. Each new protection spawned new workarounds. Each warning created more sophisticated lies. The criminals stayed one step ahead. Meanwhile, new victims joined support groups daily. Same stories, different names. The shock, the disbelief, the anger, the shame. The cycle repeated endlessly across time zones and languages. Some days, Amana wondered if sharing her story made a difference. For every person saved, how many still fell victim? For every scammer caught, how many still operated? The math was depressing. But then she'd get a message. Someone who'd almost sent money but remembered her warning. Someone who'd Googled the company name and found her story. Someone saved from the nightmare she lived. Those messages kept her going, kept her talking, kept her warning. Because somewhere right now, someone's phone is buzzing with a job offer. Someone is seeing that first payment hit their account. Someone is about to lose everything. The scammers are patient. They know desperation makes people vulnerable. They know hope makes people blind. They know exactly which buttons to push and when to push them. They're probably reading this story too, taking notes, learning what gave them away, planning their next evolution. The game continues, but so does the fight. Every story shared is a warning. Every victim who speaks up makes it harder for scammers to hide. Every person who pauses before sending money is a small victory. Amana still checks job boards, still needs flexible work, still hopes for better. But now she knows, real jobs don't ask for money. Real companies can be verified. Real opportunities don't vanish overnight. The $48,000 is gone forever, converted to cryptocurrency, split among wallets, dispersed across continents. The scammers probably don't even remember her name, but she remembers everything. The excitement of getting hired, the joy of that first payment, the creeping doubt, the crushing realization, the empty bank account, the sleepless nights, the story that might save someone else. Because somewhere someone's phone is buzzing. A job offer, work from home, good pay, flexible hours, everything they've been looking for, everything they need. And maybe, just maybe, they'll remember Amana's story. They'll pause. They'll question. They'll verify. They'll walk away. They'll keep their money and their future intact. That's the only victory possible now. Not justice for what was taken. Not recovery of what was lost. Just the hope that others won't suffer the same fate. The scammers are still out there. Still recruiting. Still stealing. Still destroying lives 3 days at a time. But so are the warnings. So are the stories. So is the truth. Amana Peters lost $48,000 in 3 days. But if her story saves even one person from the same fate, maybe something good can come from the nightmare. Maybe. The months after losing everything were the darkest. Amana would wake at 3 a.m., her heart racing, checking her phone for messages that weren't there. Ghost notifications from the scammers who'd vanished. Her body still expected those WhatsApp alerts, those dashboard updates, those promises of money that would never come. She took 3 jobs: morning shift at a warehouse, afternoon cleaning offices, weekend nights stacking shelves. Her kids barely saw her anymore. When they did, she was too exhausted to help with homework or listen to their stories. The scam had stolen more than money. It had stolen her presence from their lives. The bank letters kept coming. Overdue notices, final warnings, legal threats. Each envelope made her hands shake. She'd set up payment plans, but they wanted amounts she couldn't afford. The math never worked. 3 jobs weren't enough to fix what 3 days had destroyed. Then came the phone calls, not from a bank, but from new scammers. They'd bought her information from the original criminals. They knew she was desperate. They knew exactly how much she'd lost. They offered to help recover it, just a small fee to start the process. The first time, she almost fell for it again. The caller sounded so professional. He quoted case numbers. He named the exact platform she'd used. He said they'd already frozen the scammer's accounts and just needed processing fees to release her funds. $500, and she'd get everything back. She was typing her credit card number when her daughter walked in. "Mom, who are you talking to?" The question snapped her back to reality. She hung up, blocked the number, but they kept calling from new ones. Different voices, same script. Vultures circling wounded prey. The recovery scammers were almost crueler than the original ones. They targeted people at their lowest point. They dangled hope in front of the drowning. They knew their victims had already proven they could be fooled. Easy targets for round 2. Some victims fell for it. Amana met them in support groups. People who'd lost money to job scammers, then lost more to recovery scammers, then lost even more to lawyers who promised to sue, but disappeared with retainer fees. The spiral of exploitation seemed endless. She learned to recognize the patterns, the urgency, the insider knowledge, the promises that matched her desperation too perfectly. But learning came too late. The education had cost $48,000 she didn't have. Her eldest child figured it out first. Why mom worked constantly. Why they ate rice and beans every night. Why the small luxuries disappeared. He offered to quit school and work. The suggestion broke her heart. The scam was stealing his future too. She refused, told him to focus on studies. But he got an after-school job anyway. Handed her his first paycheck with eyes that looked too old for his age. The $20 made her cry. Her baby trying to fix what criminals had broken. The shame was suffocating. At school events, other parents talked about vacations and new cars. She smiled and stayed quiet. How could she explain that she'd sent her children's futures to criminals on WhatsApp? How could she admit she'd been that stupid? But she wasn't stupid. The support group leader, a former FBI agent, explained at every meeting. These aren't crimes of stupidity. They're crimes of sophisticated manipulation. The scammers use the same techniques as intelligence agencies. They build trust systematically. They exploit psychological vulnerabilities. They create scenarios where smart people make emotional decisions. The agent showed them training materials seized from scammer call centers, detailed scripts for every objection, psychological profiles of ideal victims, techniques for creating urgency, methods for bypassing logical thinking. It was a science, not luck. One manual particularly haunted her. It described single mothers as prime targets, desperate for flexibility, isolated from support systems, motivated by children's needs, willing to take risks for family stability. She saw herself described like a lab specimen. The scammers had workshopped their approach, tested different payment amounts, measured response rates to various urgency triggers, refined their English to sound just foreign enough to explain small oddities, but not enough to raise alarms. They'd turned crime into a data-driven business. She started speaking at community centers, churches, libraries, anywhere people would listen. She'd bring her laptop and show the actual messages, walk through how reasonable it seemed at each step, explain how the trap slowly closed. The audiences always started skeptical. They'd never fall for something so obvious. Then she'd show them the company website, professional, polished, better than many real employers. She'd show the job posting, reasonable pay, normal requirements, nothing suspicious. By the time she showed the first payment hitting her account, the skepticism faded. They could see themselves in her story. The single dad working 2 jobs, the recent graduate with student loans, the retiree on fixed income. Everyone had a vulnerability the scammers could exploit. After one presentation, an elderly man approached her. He'd been messaging with a similar company for days. They'd just asked for his first deposit. He'd planned to send it after the meeting. Her story saved his retirement savings. These moments kept her going, but they were drops against an ocean. For every person she reached, thousands of others were receiving scam messages. The criminals worked 24 hours across every time zone. She was one voice against an industry. The technology kept improving. The fake websites now had customer service chatbots. The platforms included fake employee testimonials with AI-generated faces. Some even had fake news articles about their expansion into Australia, complete with quotes from executives who didn't exist. She watched scammers adapt in real time. When she'd warn about WhatsApp, they'd switch to Telegram. When she'd mention cryptocurrency, they'd use gift cards. When she'd explain fake checks, they'd do direct deposits that would later reverse. Every defense created a new offense. The financial pressure never stopped. Credit cards maxed and canceled. Credit score destroyed. Rental applications rejected. Even getting a phone plan became impossible. The scam's impact rippled through every aspect of life. Her youngest child's birthday approached. She'd saved $20 over 2 months. Found a second-hand toy at a charity shop. Wrapped it in newspaper because she couldn't afford wrapping paper. Watched him pretend it was exactly what he wanted while her heart shattered. Some nights, after the kids slept, she'd calculate impossible mathematics. If she worked 20 hours a day, if she never ate, if she found a 4th job, the numbers never added up. The hole was too deep, the interest too high, the wages too low. She wasn't alone in these calculations. The support group shared their own impossible math. Teachers who'd lost decades of savings, nurses who'd mortgaged homes, engineers who'd emptied retirement accounts, all trying to solve equations with no solutions. The government task force made arrests occasionally, press conferences showing handcuffed suspects, seized computers, frozen accounts, but the amounts recovered were tiny. Millions stolen, thousands returned. The math of justice was as broken as everything else. When they did catch someone, it was usually low level. The person hired to receive packages. The one who opened bank accounts. Never the masterminds. Never the ones who designed the psychological torture. Those people stayed safe in countries that didn't cooperate. She learned about the industry's structure. Organized like corporations. HR departments recruiting English speakers. Training programs for new scammers. Performance bonuses for high earners. Some operations had hundreds of employees. CEOs of crime running quarterly meetings. The money flowed through layers of complexity. Cryptocurrency to gift cards to casino chips to real estate. By the time law enforcement traced one path, the funds had split into dozens more. International borders became walls protecting criminals from consequences. Meanwhile, legitimate employers became suspicious of everyone. Real companies added warnings to their job postings. No legitimate employer will ask for money, but the scammers added the same warnings to their fake posts. They evolved faster than defenses could adapt. Amana's story appeared in a documentary. She sat in harsh lighting, telling it again. The filmmaker promised it would help, reach millions, save victims. But she told the story so many times it felt hollow. Words repeated until they lost meaning. After filming, the producer asked if she considered selling her story for a movie. There might be money in it, enough to help with bills. She almost laughed, profiting from her pain, turning trauma into content. But she needed the money. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. Nothing came of it. The documentary aired to modest ratings, a few thousand views online. Comments split between sympathy and victim blaming. Why didn't you Google them? How could she be so naive? The armchair detectives who'd never felt desperation's weight. She stopped reading comments, stopped checking if her story helped, just kept working, kept paying minimums on debts that grew despite payments. Kept smiling when her kids asked if things would get better soon. Kept surviving. Then one day, a message from someone she'd helped. The elderly man from the community center. He'd started his own awareness campaign, saved 3 people in his retirement home, taught them to verify companies. Small ripples spreading outward. More messages followed. A teacher who'd incorporated her story into digital literacy classes. A banker who'd created new verification procedures. A social worker who'd started checking in with job-seeking clients. Her pain becoming prevention. But the scammers evolved too. They started creating fake victim stories, fake support groups, fake awareness campaigns that ended with donation requests. They turned the very warnings against them into new weapons. Meta-scams built on anti-scam efforts. The sophistication was breathtaking. They'd hire psychologists to refine their approaches, study neuroscience to better bypass rational thinking, use AI to personalize attacks. Crime had become a science, and they were winning. Amana kept her kids close, taught them skepticism young, showed them how to verify everything, made them promise to always ask before sending money anywhere, tried to give them armor she'd lacked. But she worried, would her paranoia poison their opportunities? Would they miss real chances because she taught them to fear? The scam had stolen their innocence too, made the world smaller, meaner, more dangerous. Her eldest got into university, partial scholarship, still needed loans she couldn't co-sign. Watched him fill out applications, knowing her destroyed credit made everything harder. Another casualty of 3 days' desperation. The acceptance letter should have been pure joy. Instead, it was tinged with a familiar ache. If she hadn't lost that money, if she'd been smarter, if she'd listened to her doubts, if, the word became a prison. Some victims recovered financially, found better jobs, rebuilt credit, moved forward. She envied them, but most stayed trapped in the aftermath, working multiple jobs forever, dreams permanently deferred, futures forever altered. The scammers probably never thought about the long-term damage. To them, she was a number. $48,000 transferred and forgotten. They'd moved on to new victims before her bank noticed a fraud. Emotional assembly lines of destruction. She wondered about them sometimes. Did they have families? Did they tell their children they worked in customer service? Did they feel anything when victims begged for mercy? Or had repetition numbed them to the human cost? In darker moments, she fantasized about confronting them. Not violence, just questions. How do you sleep? How do you justify it? How do you look at your own children knowing you've destroyed others? But she knew she'd never get answers. The support group leader said forgiveness was important. Not for them, but for her. Holding anger was drinking poison, hoping others would suffer. But forgiveness felt impossible. How do you forgive someone who stole your children's futures? She tried focusing on prevention instead, updated her presentations with new scam variations, learned about romance scams, investment scams, grandparent scams. The ecosystem of exploitation targeting every vulnerability. Each type had its own playbook. Romance scammers building relationships over months. Investment scammers showing fake profits. Grandparent scammers using fear and urgency. But all shared common DNA. Trust, pressure, money vanish. She became an expert she'd never wanted to be. Could spot scam messages instantly. Knew which grammar mistakes were intentional filters. Recognized the emotional manipulation techniques. Education paid for with everything she'd had. Local police started inviting her to speak at senior centers, high schools, community groups. She became the cautionary tale, the smart woman who'd lost everything. Living proof it could happen to anyone. But speaking didn't pay bills. Awareness didn't restore credit. Prevention didn't undo damage. She was saving others while drowning herself. The irony wasn't lost on her. The anniversary approached. 1 year since the WhatsApp message. Since hope turned to horror. Since 3 days destroyed everything. She marked it by working. What else was there to do? That night, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Job opportunity. Work from home. Excellent pay. Her finger hovered over delete. Then she screenshotted instead. Evidence for her next presentation. Proof the predators never stopped hunting. The message was perfect, better than the one that had fooled her. Professional language, reasonable promises, verifiable company name. If she didn't know better, she'd be interested. That terrified her. How many others were receiving it right now? How many were Googling the company and finding the fake website? How many were scheduling interviews with criminals? How many were about to live her nightmare? She posted warnings on every platform, reported to every authority, but knew it wasn't enough. Never enough. The scammers had resources she couldn't match, time she didn't have, technology she couldn't afford. Still, she tried. What else could she do? Let others fall into the same trap? Stay silent while predators hunted? Her story was all she had left to give. A warning written in financial ruin. The kids grew older, more aware of why mom was always tired, why they couldn't have what classmates took for granted, why she checked every message with suspicious eyes, why trust had become a luxury they couldn't afford. She tried to give them normal moments, free events at parks, library visits, home movie nights with borrowed DVDs. But poverty colored everything, made every choice a calculation, turned childhood into a lesson about consequences. Her daughter asked once if the bad people would ever be caught. She wanted to lie, say justice was coming, that good triumphed eventually. But she couldn't. Probably not, she admitted. But we can warn others. We can try to help. It wasn't enough. Would never be enough. But it was something. A tiny light against vast darkness. A whisper against screaming predators. A story that might save someone somewhere. Because right now, someone's phone was buzzing. A job offer. Perfect timing. Exactly what they needed. Professional and promising. The trap setting itself. And maybe, just maybe, they'd remember. A news story. A warning post. A woman who'd lost $48,000 in 3 days. Maybe they'd pause. Verify. Question. Escape. That possibility kept Amana going. Through exhausting shifts. Through endless bills. Through children's disappointed faces. Through dreams deferred forever. Through the aftermath that never ended. The scammers had taken everything tangible. But they'd failed to steal her voice. Her warning. Her truth. And as long as she could speak, she would. For everyone receiving that message. For everyone facing that hope. For everyone who might still be saved. The war continued. Criminals versus victims. Technology versus awareness. Desperation versus caution. She was one soldier in an endless battle. Wounded, but not silenced. Broken, but not beaten. Some were phone buzzed. Someone read a job offer. Someone felt hope rise. And somewhere Amana Peters kept telling her story. Kept warning. Kept fighting. Because someone had to. The second year brought unexpected connections. Amana's inbox filled with messages from victims worldwide. A teacher in Canada who'd lost her pension. A father in England who'd borrowed against his house. A student in India who'd used education loans. Same scam, different accents. Identical devastation. They formed an informal network, sharing new scam variations, warning about evolved tactics, supporting each other through bankruptcy proceedings and court dates. Misery might love company, but shared vigilance saved lives. Then Sarah Chun reached out, a cybersecurity expert who'd seen Amana's documentary. She had an idea. What if they could infiltrate the scammers' operations, turn their weapons against them, document everything for law enforcement? It sounded dangerous, possibly illegal, definitely foolish. But Amana was tired of being reactive, tired of warning people after damage was done, tired of playing defense while criminals played offense. She agreed to listen. Sarah explained the plan over encrypted messages. They'd create fake victim personas, engage with scammers, record everything, map their networks, build cases prosecutors could actually use, fight back with intelligence instead of just stories. The first attempt was terrifying. Amana's hands shook as she responded to a job scam email, playing interested but cautious, asking questions she'd wished she'd asked before, watching how they responded to resistance. The scammer was smooth, had answers for everything, sent fake documentation that looked better than most real companies, used psychological pressure points expertly. Even knowing it was fake, Amana felt a familiar pull of hope. Sarah traced the digital footprints. IP addresses bouncing through VPNs, cryptocurrency wallets linking to exchanges, phone numbers registered to fake names. But patterns emerged. Connections formed. The network revealed itself slowly. They weren't alone in this fight. Sarah introduced them to others. Ethical hackers who spent weekends hunting scammers. Former victims turned digital vigilantes. Marcus Williams joined next. He'd lost $30,000 to an investment scam. Now he spent nights tracking cryptocurrency flows. He'd identified several cash-out points. Physical locations where digital theft became real money. Addresses in Southeast Asia where mules collected packages. The data painted a disturbing picture. The scam industry was worth billions, employed thousands, had corruption protecting it at every level. Some countries' economies partially depended on remittances from scam call centers. Fighting it meant fighting systems, not just individuals. But small victories happened. They'd identify a scammer's real identity, pass information to local police. Sometimes arrests followed, usually not. But each disruption cost criminals money, made their operations harder, forced them to start over. Amana learned to code, basic stuff, but enough to understand Sarah's work. Spent exhausted evenings studying cybersecurity, turned her anger into education. If she couldn't recover her money, maybe she could cost them theirs. Her children noticed the change. Mom still worked multiple jobs, but now she had purpose beyond survival. She'd come home tired, but energized. Share small victories at dinner, teaching them that fighting back mattered, even when winning seemed impossible. Then came the breakthrough. Marcus identified a money mule in Australia, someone receiving packages bought with stolen credit cards, reshipping them overseas. Low level but local. Someone police could actually arrest. The operation took months, gathering evidence, building timelines, documenting every transaction. When police finally moved, they found more than expected. The mule was running multiple operations, had connections to dozens of scam networks. The arrest made news, small mention in local papers. But the investigation expanded. More arrests followed. A distribution center shut down. Millions in merchandise recovered. Not the masterminds, but infrastructure they needed. Amana felt something she hadn't in 2 years. Not quite hope, but purpose. They'd actually disrupted operations, cost criminals money, saved future victims. Her pain transforming into prevention. But the scammers noticed too. Her email filled with threats, poorly spelled warnings to stop interfering. Photos of her children walking to school. Her address posted in criminal forums. The fight had turned personal. Sarah helped her secure everything. New locks, security cameras, digital protection, police reports filed. But the fear was real. She'd poked a bear that had already mauled her once. Was saving others worth risking her family? Her eldest son decided for her. Mom, he said, you can't let them win twice. First they stole our money. Now they want to steal your voice? No, we're careful, but we don't stop. He'd grown up too fast. But his strength gave her courage. The network expanded. Journalists joined, hungry for stories. Lawyers offered pro bono help. Tech workers built tools to identify scam sites faster. Former scammers, guilt-ridden, shared insider knowledge. An ecosystem of resistance growing. They developed systems. Automated scanners finding new scam sites within hours of launch. Bots flooding scammer phones with fake victim calls. Programs tracking cryptocurrency movements in real time. Turning technology against those who'd weaponized it first. One former scammer, calling himself Phoenix, provided crucial intelligence. He'd worked in a call center for 3 years. Explained the training, the quotas, the bonuses for big scores, the celebration parties when someone sent their life savings. He described the desensitization process, how they'd laugh at victim messages, share screenshots of people begging, compete for who could extract the most. Human suffering became entertainment. Empathy surgically removed by repetition and peer pressure. But some couldn't handle it. The turnover was high. Many quit after hearing too many crying voices. Some tried to warn victims subtly. A few, like Phoenix, eventually flipped entirely. conscience finally outweighing commission. Phoenix revealed locations, building addresses, manager names, payment structures. Enough for international law enforcement to act. Raids followed in 3 countries. Hundreds arrested. Millions recovered. The network's biggest victory yet. Amana watched the news coverage from her second job. Exhausted, but exhilarated. They'd done this. Victims fighting back. David Stone's finding Goliath's eyes. Not winning the war, but winning battles. The scammers adapted quickly. Moved operations. Changed tactics. Improved security. But now they knew they were being watched. Had to spend resources on defense. Couldn't operate with impunity. The predators had become prey. Sarah's analysis showed impact. Scam success rates dropping in areas where the network operated. Criminals abandoning certain tactics. Moving to countries with less cooperation. Still operating, but harder. More expensive. Less profitable. They'd created a model others copied. Victim networks forming globally. Sharing intelligence across borders. Building databases of known scams. Creating early warning systems. Crowdsourced crime fighting born from shared pain. Tech companies started noticing. Some offered resources. Server space for databases. Developer time for tools. Corporate social responsibility meeting genuine need. Not enough, but something. Legitimacy helping the cause. A documentary filmmaker returned. This time wanting to cover the fight back. The victims who'd become hunters. Amana agreed, but differently now. Not just telling her loss, but showing her war. Evidence of impact. Proof that victims weren't helpless. The filming was different too. Instead of harsh lights and tears, they showed operations. Sarah tracking cryptocurrency. Marcus mapping networks. Phoenix explaining insider tactics. Amana coordinating warnings. Active resistance instead of passive suffering. Between shoots, life continued its grinding routine. Multiple jobs. Careful budgeting. Payment plans. But now, with purpose beyond survival. Every scammer disrupted meant someone's savings preserved. Someone's future protected. Someone's family intact. Her daughter joined the fight. Teenage technical skills helping Sarah's work. Building social media warning systems. Creating viral content about scam awareness. The next generation learning to fight digital predators before becoming prey. The schools started inviting Amana to speak differently. Not just as victim, but as fighter. Teaching students about cybersecurity alongside scam awareness. Showing them how to verify, how to protect, how to help others. Education with teeth. The network developed specialties. Some focused on romance scams, others on investment fraud. Amana became expert on employment scams, knowing every variation, every tell, every evolution. Expertise born from exploitation. They saved thousands. Documented cases where warnings arrived just in time, where families about to wire life savings stopped, where retirees about to lose everything paused. Each save a small victory, a life preserved, a future protected. But the cost was real. Threats escalated. Some network members dropped out after harassment. Others faced legal challenges from criminals with lawyers. Fighting back meant becoming targets. The war had casualties. Amana's credit slowly improved, not through recovery, but through time. Defaults aging, payment history building, still damaged but healing, like scar tissue forming. Never the same, but functional. Life finding ways forward. Her eldest graduated university. Loans he'd barely qualified for paid through jobs and determination. She watched him walk across the stage, thinking about what could have been. Pride mixed with permanent regret. The scam's shadow over every milestone. At the graduation dinner, he made a toast to Mom, who taught us that falling down isn't failure. Staying down is, who showed us how to fight even when winning seems impossible. Who turned her worst moment into others' salvation. Her tears tasted like vindication. The network grew sophisticated. AI tools predicting new scam variations. Machine learning identifying scammer language patterns. Automated systems warning potential victims within minutes of contact. Fighting fire with fire. Silicon with silicon. Law enforcement partnerships strengthened. Official channels recognizing the network's value. Intelligence sharing agreements. Coordinated operations. Victims becoming assets instead of statistics. Experience valued over credentials. A major bust happened. Entire call center raided. Hundreds of computers seized. Thousands of victim records recovered. Some people got partial restitution. Not much, but something. Symbolic victories mattering when real ones seemed impossible. Amana received a check. $300 recovered from frozen accounts. Less than 1% of her loss. But she stared at it like a miracle. Not for the amount, but for what it represented. Justice, however small. Accountability, however limited. She donated it to the network, funding server costs, supporting other victims, turning recovery into resistance. The scammer's money now working against them. Poetic justice in small denominations. Phoenix revealed more operations. His conscience heavy with names he destroyed, working tirelessly to balance scales that could never be balanced. Seeking redemption through revelation. Trying to save more than he'd stolen. He introduced other defectors. A growing underground of reform scammers. Guilt-driven to expose former employers. Providing playbooks, scripts, targeting methods. Inside information worth more than any recovery. Knowledge as weapon. They learned disturbing truths. Some operations had psychologists on staff, crafting persuasion techniques, studying victim responses, optimizing emotional manipulation, crime becoming science, exploitation becoming expertise. But understanding meant countering. Knowing techniques meant teaching defenses. Every revealed tactic became a warning shared. The network turning criminal innovation into public education. Transparency as antidote to deception. Amana's youngest child wrote a school essay about his hero. He wrote about his mom, not despite her falling for a scam, but because of what she did after. How she turned pain into purpose, loss into leadership, victim into victor. She read it after another 18-hour day. 3 jobs still necessary, bills still overwhelming, credit still damaged. But her child saw her as a hero. That mattered more than any financial recovery. Legacy measured in inspiration, not dollars. The network faced a crisis. A mole, someone feeding information back to scammers, warning them about operations, helping them evade tracking. Trust, already fragile among victims, shattered. Paranoia, replacing partnership. Sarah's investigation was meticulous. Digital forensics, revealing the traitor. Someone who'd claimed to be a victim, but never was. A scammer infiltrating their ranks, learning their methods, sabotaging their work. The hunters becoming hunted. The betrayal stung worse than the original scams. They built trust carefully, verified stories, checked backgrounds. But criminals were patient, willing to play long games, embedding themselves deep, waiting for maximum damage. They rebuilt with better security, stronger verification, compartmentalized information. Trust, but verify, becoming verify, then trust. Painful lessons in operational security. Evolution forced by infiltration. But they learned too. The mole had revealed scammer fears. What disruptions hurt most. Which tactics they couldn't counter. Where they were vulnerable. Intelligence flowed both ways. Even betrayal providing benefits. New members joined constantly. Fresh victims seeking purpose. Old victims finding strength. Technical experts donating skills. Lawyers offering time. The network becoming movement. Decentralized resistance to centralized crime. They celebrated small victories. A grandmother saved from romance scams. A student protected from job fraud. A retiree keeping their pension. Each save a candle against darkness. Individual lights forming constellation. Amana's story evolved. No longer just about loss. About fighting back, about building from ashes, about refusing victimhood, about choosing warfare over wallowing, about turning pain into power. She still worked multiple jobs, still struggled financially, still carried scars. But now she also carried purpose, led operations, saved strangers, built networks, created consequences for those who'd thought themselves untouchable. The war continued, would always continue. Technology evolving, tactics adapting, criminals innovating. But so were they, victims refusing to remain victims, fighting for others, building shields from their wounds. Because somewhere always a phone was buzzing, a perfect job, a desperate hope, a waiting trap, and somewhere always the network was watching, warning, fighting, saving. The battle never ended, but neither did the resistance. Neither did Amana Peters. Neither did hope.